They'll test you, not because you've wronged them, but because your calmness threatens their chaos. You walk into a room, and suddenly, someone tries to provoke you with a backhanded compliment. Another throws passive aggression wrapped in a smile. Why? Because your silence, your restraint, is louder than their noise. This world isn't short of toxic people. What it lacks are individuals who have trained their minds to remain unmoved. The Stoics understood this long ago. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wasn't speaking about apathy. He was pointing to the ultimate form of inner control, emotional sovereignty. Imagine a life where someone's insult doesn't shake your mood, where a manipulator's guilt tactics bounce off you like arrows against stone, where you no longer react, but respond, where your silence doesn't come from weakness, but from supreme strength. Toxic people feed on reaction. They thrive in drama. Your anger gives them fuel. Your frustration gives them joy. But your silence? That confuses them. And eventually, it breaks them. Because silence is ambiguous. It forces them to sit with their own noise. It denies them the attention they crave. It reflects them back to themselves, and most can't bear to look. When you master this mindset, you begin to realize something profound. Not every battle is worth your presence. Some conflicts exist only to pull you down to a level where the other person feels in control. The moment you refuse to engage, you win without a fight. But silence doesn't mean submission. It's not about tolerating abuse. It's about knowing the exact moment when speaking is a waste, and walking away is wisdom. The Stoics practiced a concept called ataraxia, a state of unshakable tranquility. To reach it, they didn't eliminate emotion. They trained it. They examined every judgment, every assumption, and separated what's in their control from what isn't. So when someone tries to manipulate you, ask yourself, is their behavior truly about me, or is it a reflection of their own pain? When someone slanders you, pause and ask, does their opinion change who I really am? When someone pushes your buttons, consider, why do I still have buttons they can push? This level of inner mastery doesn't come overnight. It's forged through discipline, reflection, and detachment. You must stop being addicted to being understood. You must stop chasing fairness from those incapable of it. And you must begin treating your peace as a non-negotiable asset. Because when you protect your peace, you begin to own your power. And when you own your power, toxic people stop seeing you as a target, they see you as a mirror that reveals their own fragility. And that terrifies them. They realize they can no longer manipulate you. They can't guilt you. They can't provoke you. You've transcended their games, and in silence, you've said everything that needed to be said. Now here's where most fail. They hear this, they nod, but when tested, they fold. The moment someone disrespects them, they react. They fall into the old pattern. Because theory is easy, practice is war. The real mastery begins when you're tired, provoked, disrespected, and you still choose discipline. So when the storm comes, and it will, pause. Breathe. Observe. Let them bark. Let them twist stories. Let them seek attention. You stay rooted, stoic, silent, free. They'll call you cold, arrogant, detached. That's their defense mechanism, an attempt to label what they cannot control. Because your silence strips them of power, and in their desperation, they try to reclaim it with words. Empty words. Don't flinch. The longer you hold your ground, the more they unravel. Not because you attacked them, but because you didn't. They were counting on your emotional reaction. That's what they needed to feel relevant. But you gave them nothing, and that nothing echoes louder than any outburst ever could. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop fearing confrontation, not because you enjoy it, but because it no longer owns you. You begin to walk into rooms without needing to be liked. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Your value no longer fluctuates based on someone else's perception. You become untouchable, not in a loud, boastful way, but in the quiet, unbothered strength that Stoic philosophy has always taught. Seneca said, "If you really want to escape the things that harass you, what you're needing is not to be in a different place, but to be a different person." And that's the truth most miss. It's not about escaping toxic people. It's about transforming into someone who no longer reacts to them. When your internal world is grounded, the external world loses its grip on you. You start recognizing manipulation before it fully forms. You see the red flags without needing them to wave louder. You no longer chase apologies. You stop demanding closure. Why? Because your peace is not up for auction anymore. You've withdrawn it from the hands of those who never earned it. And as your silence deepens, so does your clarity. You begin to hear your own thoughts again. You begin to rediscover what you value, what you tolerate, and what you refuse to entertain. You walk lighter, not because the world changed, but because your mind did. That's the power of this mindset. It doesn't just protect you from toxic people, it liberates you from needing them to change. You become your own sanctuary, calm, measured, immovable. And when they try again, because they will, you simply return to that inner stillness. That space where peace lives and ego dies. You watch them reach, provoke, perform. But they're performing for an audience that no longer applauds. You don't react. You don't explain. You simply remain. And in that stillness, you realize something even more profound. Your silence is not just a defense, it's a message. One that speaks louder than argument, sharper than retaliation. It tells the world, I do not engage in battles that cost me my peace. It tells manipulators, your tactics are visible, your power is irrelevant. And it tells your past self, the one who used to overthink, overreact, over-explain, that growth has arrived. You begin to notice how many conversations are actually traps. How many apologies are performances. How often people project their wounds onto you, expecting you to bleed with them. But you don't. Not anymore. Because you've trained your mind to pause before responding. You've developed the ability to separate emotion from evaluation. And that is a rare power. Now when someone criticizes you unfairly, you don't rush to defend your name. You ask yourself, is their voice worthy of shaping my self-image? When someone withdraws affection to control you, you don't panic. You realize, love that manipulates is not love, it's leverage. When someone tries to bait you into drama, you don't rise. You see it for what it is, a desperate cry for chaos in a world they can't control. You've stopped being a participant in the emotional theater of others. And in doing so, you've become the thing they never saw coming. Unbothered. And that's exactly where your power begins. Grounded. Silent, but not passive. Present, but not reactive. Aware, but not available to every battle that invites you. This is the Stoic path. Not just reading the words, but living them when the heat rises, when you're tested, when your instinct is to fight back. That's where it matters most. And something strange begins to happen. You start attracting different energy. The chaos fades. The manipulative lose interest. The ones who thrive on conflict grow bored. Your silence creates a boundary they can't cross. A mystery they can't solve. They move on, not because you lost, but because you refuse to play. And in the quiet that follows, peace returns like a long-lost friend. The kind of peace you don't need to fight for. You just protect it by continuing to choose silence over ego, clarity over conflict, purpose over pride. This is not weakness. It is command. A quiet command over yourself, your emotions, your energy. And once you've tasted this level of control, this freedom, you'll never trade it for petty victories again. You've stepped beyond the reach of toxic people. You've become untouchable, not because they stopped trying, but because their efforts no longer reach where you reside. And now, in this space of stillness, you begin to evolve. Not in grand declarations or dramatic reinventions, but in subtle, steady refinement. You start choosing solitude over shallow connection. You prefer depth over noise. You speak less, not because you have nothing to say, but because you no longer feel the need to prove anything. You understand now that not everyone deserves access to your thoughts, your presence, or your time. These are currencies, precious ones, and the Stoic lives like a wise investor. No longer throwing energy into bottomless pits of validation, argument, or approval. Your focus shifts inward. You audit your triggers. You observe your mind like a calm witness rather than a frantic participant. When something irritates you, you don't explode, you explore. You ask, what wound is this pressing? What truth am I avoiding? What expectation did I silently hold? This is the essence of Stoic discipline, not suppressing emotions, but understanding them, transcending them through clarity, not avoidance. The world keeps spinning, full of noise, conflict, chaos, but you're no longer pulled into its rhythm. You've built a sanctuary inside yourself, one that can't be stormed by loud voices or false urgency. And when others see this in you, they don't understand it. They may call it detachment, coldness, indifference. But it's not that. It's presence. It's living in alignment with your values instead of your impulses. It's responding to life, not reacting to it. And it's knowing, with unshakable certainty, that your peace is more valuable than anyone's opinion, approval, or apology. Toxic people can't survive in this atmosphere. Not because you've become cruel, but because you've become clear. And clarity repels confusion. They can't bait you with guilt because you no longer carry the weight of needing to be understood. They can't play the victim when you refuse to be the rescuer. They can't manipulate with praise or punishment because you're anchored in something deeper, something they can't touch. Self-respect. And the moment you commit to that, truly commit, you begin to live above the noise. You no longer chase peace. You are peace, carved out through trial, through practice, through silence. It's not easy. It never was. But it's worth it. Because the day you stop being disturbed by toxic people is the day you become free. And freedom, real freedom, isn't loud. It doesn't need celebration. It doesn't come with applause. It's quiet, subtle, internal. It's waking up without a tight chest. It's moving through your day without rehearsing imaginary arguments. It's the stillness you feel when you know no one owns a piece of you anymore. This kind of freedom changes the way you walk. You're not rushing to prove. You're not bending to please. You're no longer shrinking to make others comfortable, nor inflating to demand respect. You're simply centered, rooted. And that kind of presence, authentic, silent, unmoved, creates a ripple effect. People sense it. They approach you differently. Some with respect. Some with distance. The ones who once thrived on your reactions slowly fade away, because they no longer recognize you. You're no longer reactive, emotional, predictable. You've become unreadable to the ones who depended on your chaos. Even those close to you may try to test your stillness. They'll say you've changed, that you've become distant, that you don't care anymore. But what they're really saying is, they can no longer pull you out of your peace. And that makes them uncomfortable. Because when you stop being emotionally available to dysfunction, you start threatening every system that benefited from your self-abandonment. Let them be uncomfortable. This path, this Stoic discipline, is not about comfort. It's about liberation. And liberation demands sacrifice. The sacrifice of approval. of instant validation, of the short-lived pleasure of clapping back or proving your worth. You learn to sit with your urges instead of feeding them. You learn to let your silence speak in rooms that used to trigger your voice. You learn that boundaries don't require explanation, they require consistency. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you're not losing ground, you're reclaiming it. You're choosing long-term strength over short-term satisfaction. You're choosing to live as the master of your mind, not its slave. And as the days pass, you start to see what Stoicism was really teaching all along. It wasn't about being emotionless. It was about being emotionally intelligent. It was about living in alignment with reason, with virtue, with a deep sense of self that no insult, no manipulation, no toxic energy could penetrate. You no longer react because your peace is not negotiable. You no longer engage because your time is sacred. You no longer explain because your clarity is enough. And those who once held power over you, through guilt, chaos, drama, they begin to fade into irrelevance. Not because you destroyed them, but because you outgrew the need to respond to them. That is real strength. And with that strength, something beautiful begins to unfold. You start choosing environments that reflect your growth rather than your history. You walk away, not out of bitterness, but out of reverence for your energy. You no longer need closure from those who shattered you, because you've realized that their silence, their absence, was the closure. You've stopped arguing with the past. You've stopped rewriting moments to make them more palatable. You accept what was, without needing to carry it into what is. The version of you that once tolerated disrespect just to avoid conflict no longer exists. In its place stands a person forged in reflection, sharpened by restraint, and defined not by how loudly they speak, but by how little they need to. This new version of you is deliberate, observant, strategic. You enter a conversation and sense the undercurrents before a word is spoken. You hear the insecurity behind the bragging, the need behind the flattery, the resentment behind the silence. You see clearly, not because you judge, but because you've seen it all before and you've outgrown the game.